So we should be able to get our full 2 hours in. Welcome to meeting number 63 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to standing orders. Members are attending in person and in the room remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses of members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen for either Floor, English, or French. So for those in the room, you can also choose the language of your choice on the headset. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, the feedback events can occur and they can be very harmful for our interpreters. So please keep your earphones away from the microphone so that you don't get feedback from that. And in accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests, I can let the committee know that all witnesses have been tested for their audio, and all systems are go there. So a reminder that all comments should come through the chair. So pursuant to Standing Order 10831 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, September 18th, 2023, the committee commences its study of integration of Indigenous traditional knowledge and science in government policy development. It's now my pleasure to welcome as an individual, Susan Coutts, Professor and Tier 1 Canada Research Chair on Arctic One Health by a video conference. And we have from the Inuit to Pilarit Kunutuktukmi, Natan Obed, sorry for the pronunciation, Mr. Obed is the president, and Gabby Grable, Director of, Carrie Grable, Director Inuit of Kauyi Sarvingat. And from the Institute Shapekish, we have Marjolaine Chernish, Executive Director by video conference. Each individual and organization will be given a maximum of 5 minutes for your remarks, after which we will proceed to rounds of questions. I'll signal you when you have a minute left, and then as we get closer, I'll get more animated, no doubt. So we'll start off with Susan Coutts as an individual. Please, Ms. Coutts.
Great. Thank you so much. You can hear me all right? Okay, so I want to start with a quote from Miles Peterson, an Inuk harvester from Kuruktuk, Nunavut. We were in a caribou health workshop last week, and I asked him and other participants if there was anything they'd like me to bring to this meeting today. And Miles' response was, it's difficult to find common ground between traditional knowledge and policy because traditional knowledge is passed down over generations and is how we live, whereas policy is something that is imposed on us. So I was born and raised in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. I'm a descendant of white settlers to Canada of German and Hungarian heritage. I'm a veterinarian. I've got a graduate degree in wildlife health, and I'm a professor at University of Calgary. I've worked with Dene and Inuit communities in the Arctic and subarctic around domestic and wildlife animal health for over 30 years. I do not, however, suppose to represent these communities today. Rather, I'm presenting my views and perspectives from my own personal and research experience in the Canadian North, and I am thrilled to see my co-panelists today who I know will represent those Indigenous perspectives. So my research program has centered on working with Indigenous communities to understand impacts of climate change on the health and sustainability of important wildlife species such as caribou and muskoxen. Healthy wildlife are really critical not only to the health of Arctic ecosystems, but for food security of communities across the North. For example, in Nunavut, up to 70% of the population is food insecure. Wildlife help to combat this food insecurity. And in fact, the historic value of the subsistence harvest of wildlife is estimated to be about $198 million a year food replacement value. This figure doesn't include the additional economic value through tourism, the sale of handicrafts, the use for clothing and tools, or the spiritual and cultural importance to communities. So in our research, what we try to do is bring together Indigenous, local, and Western scientific knowledges and ways of knowing and doing to better understand the health and the threats to these subsistence wildlife species. We try to answer questions like, will they be there for generations to come? Or questions like, is it safe to eat? To do this, we are equally partnered with local Indigenous wildlife co-management organizations in Nunavut and Northwest Territories, as well as government employees in wildlife. And we've got a community-based wildlife health program. A key goal of this program is to ensure Indigenous voice is meaningfully represented in wildlife management policy. So we have a three-pronged approach. It includes documentation of traditional knowledge, hunter-based surveillance, and Western science. And I'll focus on the traditional knowledge and how that has been used as examples of how it can be put into policy. We've documented traditional knowledge through narratives, which is storytelling, and participatory epidemiology methods. This work has generated new knowledge through traditional knowledge, including identification of major muskox epidemics and population declines, new disease syndromes in caribou and muskoxen, including diseases that are a threat to people. The TK, or traditional knowledge, has contributed directly to policy through guiding practices for ice breaking in the Arctic sea ice, where ice breaking patterns have to abide by the needs of the dolphin and Union caribou who use that sea ice to cross on their annual migrations. The traditional knowledge has redrawn the range maps for caribou. The traditional knowledge has designed new population census and protocols for counting caribou, a really important resource. And it's also informing public health policy around the zoonotic or disease risks from handling and consuming wildlife species. But all of this has taken people sitting down around the table together, talking, listening, and trusting each other. Something you can do at a small scale, but gets difficult to scale up. 1 minute? Okay. So quickly, traditional knowledge and Western knowledge, we've been asked about conflict and what to do about that. And I think this is something that we shouldn't be afraid of. It happens within the scientific community. It happens in the traditional knowledge community. When we see conflicts, we shouldn't be afraid of them, but we should embrace them because it allows us to dig deeper into what might be going on there. So what do we need to do to ethically and effectively use traditional knowledge in policy development? We need to think about this as it is fundamentally a Western colonial construct, and it's a power relationship. So we really need to think of a paradigm shift, a system shift. There's excellent examples of how it can be done and these examples are from Indigenous scholars. Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall talked about two-eyed seeing principle, learning from one eye to see with the strengths of one eye, strengths of Indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, and from the other eye with strengths of Western knowledge and ways of knowing, and learning to use both those eyes together and for the benefit of all. Great. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, and hopefully we can get to more examples in the question period. Now we'll move on to the Inuit Tipirit Kunutumi. I hope I'm closer, Mr. Oved, and it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to be here with all of you. I'll start with Inuit Tapeli Kanatami, which means Inuit United in Canada. And Kanatami is really just in Canada. So hopefully that helps you with remembering. I've thought of many ways to spend my 5 minutes here with you all this afternoon. I guess I'll just start with the term conflict. And as the previous speaker had mentioned, the term conflict is used because the inability for Western science and all of the mechanisms and structures that the Government of Canada has that rely on Western science that systematically does not accept on principle Indigenous knowledge as being on par or equal with Western science. So it isn't necessarily a conflict in so much as it is an outcome of your policies, your legislation, your ways of funding. So it is of no surprise to us as Inuit that we are in this dilemma where there are huge challenges that we have in our communities that need science and knowledge to solve. but we get stuck sometimes in the relationship more than we do in the actual work. ITK represents the rights of 70,000 Inuit in this country. We have settled modern treaties, and we have co-management structures that cover 40% of Canada's landmass and govern things such as wildlife. And immediately when I think of the incorporation of Inuit knowledge into decision making, I think of those bodies, especially for things like wildlife, polar bears, beluga, narwhal, and what just needless fights we've had over the past 30 and 40 years to try to recognize the knowledge that we have about those species that we interact with every day. We've tried to move this conversation into systemic change conversations. And I'm going to quote myself from a 2019 Canadian Science Policy Journal about this very subject. It's time to end the research community's unhelpful focus on integrating Indigenous knowledge into science and policy and replace it with a focus on advancing Inuit self-determination in all aspects of research through partnerships between researchers, research institutions, and governments, and Inuit rights-holding organizations. The research community has positively responded to calls by Inuit, First Nations, and Métis to respect and support the integration of Indigenous knowledge into research projects, policies, and initiatives. However, an unintended negative consequence of this trend vis-a-vis Inuit is that the discourse around Indigenous knowledge is often wielded to limit Inuit participation in research projects, policies, and initiatives to their Indigenous knowledge components. Despite being characterized as part of a progressive research agenda, the focus on Indigenous knowledge all too often maintains the status quo of limiting Inuit involvement in research to the role of passive research subjects. Inuit seek to permanently transform this colonial paradigm through the advancement of Inuit self-determination. To this end, we have released the National Inuit Strategy on Research. We've provided that copy to this committee. We also have worked with the Government of Canada to ensure that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is signed into law here in Canada, and that Measure 30 under the UNDRIP Action Plan, or the UNDA Action Plan, focuses very specifically on supporting Indigenous data sovereignty and Indigenous-led data strategies through legislative, regulatory, and policy options, and supports Indigenous jurisdiction over their data, and enables Indigenous peoples to lead surveys and other sorts of data collection strategies. We have to recalibrate a system that was never intended to support Indigenous knowledge in any way. And I look forward to the conversation about how we do that, but Inuit have provided a roadmap, and we would love to work with government on implementing it. Nakamik.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I look forward to our discussion. Now from the Institute Jakapash, Marjolaine Tchernish, for 5 minutes, please.
Kwekwe, bonjour.
Kwekwe, hello. I've greeted you in my language. I am Innu from the community of Ouachetmak-Manioutenem on the North Shore of the province of Quebec. Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this process that focuses on the importance of working on this issue. Participating on the study by the Standing Committee on the best ways to integrate the traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge of Indigenous peoples for developing government policies is a relevant and respectful way to move forward with First Nations. And it allows them to express themselves and be recognized. Despite the short time we have today, I would have liked to have taken, in fact, I thought I had 15 minutes, but perhaps I misread. So I'll basically summarize what I've prepared for notes. It's taken more than 40 years to recognize First Nations rights. And now the country was built at the expense of Indigenous peoples at the beginning of colonizations. Before the arrival of European settlers Indigenous peoples had social structures based on territory occupation and management. Children learned through observation, repetition, and practice. They were prepared to be adults by practicing various rituals, social activities, and rites of passage to help them master their language, know their people's history through legends, and to keep their values and beliefs. The adult knew its territory well and was a good hunter and had a circular relationship with nature. We are all responsible for nature. Then, 374 years, during which first peoples lived under the yoke of the colonial government and were maintained under servitude. Then there was torture and abuse inflicted on our peoples, and this created intergenerational trauma. Even if the term colonial is part of history, we can still see the results today. Who can claim that it is not still influencing settlers and those who were colonized? There's an author of a book that translates as Red Skin, White Blacks, and the Assembly of First Nations is cited as speaking to the Indigenous Peoples Committee. Indigenous peoples cannot put their individual rights before those of the group. Our societies have never worked that way, contrary to yours, and that's what explains the current conflict. If we were to put our individual rights before the collective rights of all, then we would be in even more trouble. It's true that our political system is no longer connected to our nomadic style of life. We help each other when resources are short. We act as if nothing belonged to us. We help each other and save ourselves when it's necessary. We had no interest in collecting things that had no use. In Canada, there are about 80 Indigenous nations, and each one has its own history, language, and its own beliefs and knowledge and traditions. Now, within you, we have habits and customs that focus around stories and legends, the oral tradition, stories that are passed down throughout generations. The interpretation of these stories are also carried forward by historians. There is a social structure, and we're not the only ones to have gone through a change. Habits and customs have also undergone a transformation to adapt to the political situation and the social situation of the times. While our elders remind us of the importance of remembering our wisdom and knowledge and passing that on to the next generation. And that is part of and we pass that down through our mother tongue. We have legal principles that belong to us as Innu, and we speak of the living and non-living world. These are part of our traditional practices of the Innu nation. The great spirits are the caribou. For others, it's the turtle, moose, eagle.
Conservation de la mémoire collective.
I have to ask you to wrap up if you could, please. Sorry.
En fait, ce que je recommande, c'est de...
Well, what I'm recommending is to integrate traditional knowledge in the government policies. Elders really need to take part. Elders from all nations, they need to be part of this study.
And I'm sorry, the constraints we have are unnatural constraints to stories and sharing information, but we have to try and stay within our time limits. So thank you for sharing that. I was also thinking of Sheila Watt Cloutier's book, Right to be Cold, and there's some tremendous reading out there on the Inuit culture as well. Now we're going to start with our 6-minute rounds, starting with the Conservatives with Michelle Rempel-Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to witnesses today for some very insightful testimony, particularly Mr. Obed. I appreciated your perspective quite a bit. And it's always good to hear from a Calgarian as well, too. So I appreciated the commentary as well, too. Colleagues, just before I get into my questions, I have one housekeeping item I'd like to draw colleagues' attentions to, and it relates to Canada's ability to address the very emergent situation of climate change. So with that, I move that pursuant to Standing Order 108.3.1, the Standing Committee on Science and Research conduct a study regarding the recent investigation and reports on Sustainable Development Technology Canada and serious allegations surrounding wrongdoing at the fund, that this study examines the ways in which these alarming allegations surrounding the fund, which distributes $1 billion to the clean technology sector, may have impeded Canada's ability to research and deploy new technologies and advancements in science in the important fight against climate change. That the committee invite relevant SDTC officials, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, related government officials and expert witnesses, that the study consist of at least 5 meetings, and that the committee report its findings to the House, and that the witness meetings happen by December 31st, 2023. Colleagues, partisanship aside, we need to, and we may have differing opinions on how to get to this end goal, but we do need to have ways to fight climate change in Canada. And SDTC is Canada's largest financial supporter of early-stage environmental technology. It is, I believe, entirely government and taxpayer funded. And there have been some significantly alarming allegations that have been playing out over the last several months, to which I believe there has been very little remedy applied to. There will be, I'm sure that there will be investigations into some of the allegations of misappropriation or mismanagement. But the reality is that we're now close to a year into this fund and these allegations. The fund has been suspended, and this is one of the primary ways of Canada applying funds to come up with ways to fight climate change. Part of when we look at Canada's greenhouse gas emissions inventory and we see that we're not even 50% of the way to meeting our emissions reductions targets, the only way that we are going to move people off of high carbon consumer products and practices is if there are readily available, widely deployed substitutes to those high carbon products and practices. That can be things like green infrastructure, be it EV charging stations or electrified grids, or frankly, since we have a Calgarian on the line, even an LRT up to north central Calgary. But the reality is that a lot of these technologies have to be developed, and Canada's key fund to researching these technologies is under a cloud of significant controversy right now. And given the scope of this committee's work with regard to its mandate to look at research and development in Canada, it is very incumbent and urgent, probably one of the most urgent things that we could do, to examine how this misappropriation, which has not been remedied, is impacting Canada's ability to research and deploy new technologies that could help actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Colleagues, for those of you who, very briefly, who might not be aware of what has happened, this is now a year long, and there was something last week that there was another incident that happened that kind of spiked this to the forefront. So a year ago, in November of last year, 20 current and former employees of the foundation raised concerns about the agency's financial mismanagement and harmful workplace culture. In a 300-page document submitted to the Auditor General's office and later to the Privy Council office, they claimed that certain projects put forward for STTC funding were introduced by individuals with close ties to the agency's leadership, raising concerns about breaches to SDTC's conflict of interest policy. The claimants also alleged that there were poor workplace conditions. Then in April, there was a small investigation that cost the government tens of thousands of dollars. There was a report issued, but no remedy has been put in place to date. The fund has been frozen. And today, or last week, actually just a couple of days ago, on November the 1st, in a CBC article, a recording of Assistant Deputy Minister at Innovation, Science and Technology made the following comments about the fund and some of the alleged mismanagement. It was free money, was one of the comments that was made. It's almost like a sponsorship level scandal type of giveaway. Colleagues, it's very important that this is Canada's top fund to look at technologies that could help address climate change. It's currently frozen. We now have a top bureaucrat within the Government of Canada likening the management of this fund to the sponsorship scandal. And it is incumbent upon this committee to figure out what recommendations need to be given to the government to ensure that that funding is A, appropriately managed, and B, directed to research and development activities that can actually help get technologies put forward that can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this country. I can't think of a more important thing for our committee to be doing. I would argue that we can do this study as well as this as well too, but we need to have people in front of this committee talking about the impact that the freezing of the fund, the mismanagement, the lack of action is having on Canada's competitiveness and ability to research technologies and come up with alternatives that would allow us to fight climate change. You know, it's a mantra in the House that we need to look at the science and support scientific principles and look at research. You all know what my background is. I completely agree with that. But we have to start with management and understanding the impact of this type of mismanagement on the science and research capacity of our country to address climate change. So, colleagues, I think this is a no-brainer. I would encourage you to support it so that we can get on with investigating this, coming up with ways that if the fund is going to be unfrozen, maybe it shouldn't be unfrozen, maybe it needs to be something else. That is what this committee's scope is for. We should be looking at that ASAP, and there should be consequences for this mismanagement as well as holding back Canada's capacity to research in the important fight against climate change. Thank you.
I apologize to the witnesses that are here to discuss this very important study that we have on Indigenous traditional knowledge and science in policy development, something that the committee was seized to get hold of and understand from you your perspectives, which we hope to get back to. But we are now in a debate on a motion that's on the floor, and pursuant to the way that the committee works, now each committee member that wants to speak has a chance to speak on that motion. We have a speaking list at the front. Hopefully we can get to a vote and get back to our study. But we'll go to our speaking list now. Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies to all the witnesses for wasting your valuable time with this. Not to say that Ms. Rempel-Gardner can't put forward a motion. It's her prerogative to do so. I'm very happy to finally hear Conservatives talking about the need to fight climate change and reduce GHG emissions. Since I got here 4 years ago, I've battled them every day in committee in the House with the hopes that one day they would admit that climate change is real and that we need to fight it with every effort at our disposal. I think traditional Indigenous knowledge actually has a lot to offer to us in terms of that paradigm shift and the systemic change that we all know is needed. Anyway, just in terms of the motion, so Sustainable Development Technology Canada has been around for quite some time. We know that there were allegations of mismanagement. We also know that the minister acted immediately to issue a third-party assessment, which has produced a report. Members at the committee, at the Ethics Committee, who are studying this, I should say that there's 2 committees currently actively studying this. So both Ethics and Public Accounts are working on this. Ethics has been provided with a redacted version of the report, which just redacts the personal information of the people involved so that they don't have any threats against their person. So it protects their privacy and confidentiality while still laying bare for committee members at those committees to get into the details and really look at the report from a governance perspective to see where there may be challenges with SDTC and its governance practices. So there's more than enough there in terms of public accounts and ethics both studying this. I will also note that Public Accounts had the Deputy Auditor General last week on November 2nd appear and give testimony. I have read that testimony, so there's some really good testimony happening there. We also have Minister Champagne, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, appearing before Ethics. I think it's actually right now. So if anybody really wants to hear about this, we could either put it up on a screen or maybe go down the hall and listen to the testimony. Maybe we should consider adjourning the meeting for today and just going and visiting that committee, because obviously if that's what the Conservatives would rather study than Mr. Canning's motion, which I think is a better use of our time in this committee. We also have a 1064, which means that we have an emergency meeting tomorrow on the Industry Committee that is on this topic as well. So this would be the fourth committee that would be studying SDTC if the Conservatives had their way. I believe that our time is valuable. I think that the proper place for this study is with Ethics and Public Accounts. Perhaps two committees looking into it is enough. But I actually think if the Auditor General has announced that they're doing a full audit of this, shouldn't we all put our faith in the Auditor General's work and wait until that investigation and audit is complete before making our judgments on it? I think for me, if the Auditor General is actually looking into it, which I think is a good thing, then we need to let them do their work. I don't see why doing another investigation here at this committee, which would be redundant given the fact that at least two other committees are looking into this, and perhaps a third as of tomorrow. So I really think that the committee's resources and time is valuable. We have witnesses before us that I think bring a lot of wisdom and knowledge to our conversations, and we need to get on with that study. Lastly, that there also is a third-party investigation going on the HR practices at SDTC. That's in addition to the Auditor General's audit. So, and that's been proactively commissioned by the minister as well. The minister found out about the allegations of mismanagement, asked for a third-party review. That review has been done. They've frozen the accounts of SDTC until the various allegations are remedied. And there is an action plan that SDTC is putting in place to address some of the allegations of mismanagement by the end of December. So all of those things were already underway before the Auditor General now has said that they're going to do an audit. So I think, to me, this is a lot of investigation into this matter already. I don't see why we would forego the important work at this committee as well. So I'll leave it there, but that's where I stand on this.
Okay, thank you. And just to let you know what we have on the speaker list, we have Mr. Tucker, Mr. Soroka, Mr. Cannings, and Ms. Rempel-Garner on deck. And this portion of the meeting will be going until 5 o'clock, so I'm hoping we can get some questions to our witnesses, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Tucker.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for our witnesses for being here today. We're going to get back to the important work of this study here shortly. I'm not sure, Mr. Turnbull, what you actually meant by any of the comments you shared. Yes, there's lots of investigations going on. There's RCMP, there's Auditor General, there's smoke here. There is a massive fire that is taking place with billions of dollars of taxpayers' money wasted. And we hear after study on how we, as a country, we are letting down our research and science community because of lack of funding. We've heard on numerous studies that what the remedy would be is to address some of the inflationary pressures that our researchers are facing. And after 8 long years, there's no plan to reduce emissions from this government. Their signature tax plan to reduce emissions is in tatters. There's carve-outs that are being placed in Atlantic Canada. We have premiers from across this country that are together in Halifax talking about how the mismanagement of environmental plan has hurt this generation and the next generation in Canada. The fund, the SDTC, was to do the important work of investing in green funds to lower emissions, and we found out that it was nothing but a slush fund to go to the Liberal insiders. And when the truth comes out about how much mismanaged funds are out there, and it's going to make Canadians' blood boil, because we do have issues out there that need addressing, that this fund was supposed to hopefully reduce emissions, and we find out that it's literally the sponsorship 2.0, that this government has been funneling money to insiders. And right now, this committee is tasked with finding solutions that are facing the science and research community. And we just concluded another study that of underfunding, that there's, because of the inflation that is at a 30-year high right now, that people can't afford to live and work and do the research that they do because of this government's actions. And then we find out that the billions of dollars that have been put into this fund are being misused. And at the science community, this is the science, the SDTC is set up to address exactly what this committee is supposed to be trying to find answers for our Canadian researchers and science being done in Canada. And we are being shut down by the Liberals that we can't study that. This motion has a completion date of December 31st, and this is a very timely and important study that we can do, both studies that are on the docket and this one, before we rise for the Christmas break. And I would hope that the members of this committee take a pause and ask themselves why they are here in Ottawa, not just at this committee, but in the role that work that you're doing. And if you are a member of this committee, you should be looking for answers in science. And this is going to investigate the agency that was supposed to fund that. But instead, we have the Auditor General, the RCMP, other committees, and hopefully this committee that is going to be finding the answers that Canadians demand. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Soroka, you're next, and then Mr. Cannings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologize to the witnesses, but because of this timely situation, that's why the motion is being brought forward. I know many times people have talked to me about the carbon tax, and they say, if we get 90% of this money back, where does the last 10% go? And I tell them it's supposed to be done to lower environmental emissions or come up with better ways to protect the environment, and yet now you start hearing it's more of just a slush fund for the Liberal Party to pay for insiders, and that's where I think it's quite a disturbing situation we have. We need to start making sure we're accountable. There seems to be so many issues coming over the last number of years about money that's been spent inappropriately. And Mr. Tucker has mentioned several times about how our universities, research facilities have all been looking about getting more money available to them, and yet there's money sitting there to make the environment a lot better, but what ends up happening is this money is only paid out to people that are supporting the Liberal government. So that's why I really think we need to look at this motion, get down to the base of it, because it's dealing with science and research people that could be getting this money, and we definitely need to support this motion and move it forward, and I'll keep my statements brief then, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cannings and Mr. Tucker's adding himself to the list again, so we'll take a look at how the time is going on this meeting, and then we can have a brief discussion on that following these next interventions. Mr. Cannings?
Yeah, well, I mean, as has been said, there's smoke and fire here. There's obviously something very wrong going on. That said, this is being looked at by ethics, it's being looked at by public accounts, it's being looked at by the Auditor General, the RCMP. I mean, I think this is a pattern of what ends up. I think it's very important to look into this, to get the answers. But it ends up there's 4 committees doing the same work, calling the same witnesses, getting the same answers. And, it's important to get to the bottom of it, but there comes a point when you're wasting time and resources here in committees and Parliament. And I think when you have a situation like this that is clearly an operations problem, clearly an ethical problem, it's more in the ambit of ethics and public accounts or government operations than it is for the Science and Research Committee. So, I'm not in support of moving ahead with us studying this as well. I'll wait with interest to see what is found in the other committees. I know I'm getting texts from my colleagues who are studying this at this very minute in other committees. So I would just say let's let those committees do their work. I think that's important. But to pile on things, it's just like what we were dealing with in my other committee, the International Trade Committee, where the Conservatives wanted international trade to look into the ArriveCan scandal, when again it's being looked at by 2 or 3 other committees, and it's not really an international trade thing, it's an ethics thing. It's a scandal of what is being done with our public accounts, not about what this committee should be looking into, or the International Trade Committee for that matter. So I think it's important. I think we should, as a Parliament, look into this, but I think this would not be fruitful for us to spend that time.
Thank you for your clarity on that. I'm kind of counting votes as we go, and I see where these are going. Ms. Rempel-Garner, please.
I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Cannings, for his comments, but I want to implore him to think about something. There is no committee studying the impact that the mismanagement of this fund, as well as the freezing of this fund, has had on Canada's ability to both research and deploy clean technology, particularly as it pertains to ensuring that there are readily available, affordable alternatives to high-carbon consumer products and practices. SDTC is the key fund in Canada to do that, and there's the lack of movement forward on this, and I know Mr. Turnbull has claimed that the government has taken action on it, but they haven't. This has not been rectified, and we're sitting here, and we hear the government talk about climate change every day, but this is the key fund that our academics, small businesses, other people in Canada who are looking at ways to develop made-in-Canada solutions that address greenhouse gas emissions within the Canadian context, which is different than many other parts of the world. I mean, look, what I have found, and I reject my colleague Mr. Turnbull's assertion that he made about my party and colleagues. I've spent years of my pre-political career, as well as time in cabinet, looking at ways to address climate change in Canada. And just because I question whether or not the carbon tax is working doesn't mean that that's a rejection of the need for policy. In fact, it's a responsible question. If our greenhouse gas emissions inventories show that Canada is not even 50%, won't even be 50% of the way of making its targets, it's incumbent upon the committee that is responsible for looking at research and development to look at what, when our key fund for looking at climate change research funding has been frozen and is under mismanagement, this is our job. And with respect to both Mr. Turnbull and Mr. Cannings, no other committee is looking at that key aspect. I'm sure they're going to be looking at governance, but we actually should be, as a committee, asking, are we funding climate change research appropriately? Are we deploying those technologies appropriately? And all of the mismanagement in this fund, like the answer to that is yes. We are. There is a big problem here. So how are we going to fix that? And, you know, ethics and other public accounts, they're going to be tasked with looking at the governance issues on this. Our committee should be looking at the funding mechanisms that have been royally messed up in this scandal. There's been no action taken in a year. You know, for my colleague in Quebec, because I am always trying to ensure that there is a Quebec rationale for this as well, too. SDTC lists Transition Energetic Quebec as one of its key partners for funding innovative clean tech startups. It also has multiple other linkages into Quebec, and the ability for this fund to not just fund research in other parts of the country, but in Quebec as well, is also impacted, right? I'm just going to say this, colleagues, a carbon tax only works if there is alternatives to move consumer behaviors to a substitute good, right? In Canada, in most parts of Canada, carbon fuels, carbon practices are highly inelastic because we haven't developed and deployed substitute goods. A lot of people in Canada will think, okay, well, maybe I can't buy an electric vehicle, for example, because we don't have a national system of electric vehicle charging stations. Or we don't have we haven't thought about the electrical grid. Or insert any other list of any other technology that could help us displace that behavior. That is actually sound public policy. That's for us to say, how do we do this more effectively is our job in the Science and Researching Committee. And we have $1.5 billion fund that has been likened by a senior bureaucrat as it was free money. That is almost sponsorship level scandal. How can any member of the government stand up and talk about taking climate change seriously or research and development seriously if they are unwilling in this committee to examine our funding, if our funding mechanisms are appropriately working in this area? Like, I want colleagues in the Liberal Party to really think about this vote carefully. This is not, like, we should be looking at whether or not the fund, the key fund in our country that we spent, like, this is not an insignificant amount of money, guys. This is $1.5 billion. Thinking about what that could do for any community in this country. Anything. It could build infrastructure in anybody's riding. We put $1.5 billion into this fund specifically to combat climate change, and it has not been working for over a year. There's significant allegations of mismanagement, and the funding is frozen. And we're saying that we shouldn't be looking at it in the Science and Technology Committee? I challenge anyone in this room to get up in the House of Commons and say after this, with good faith, I challenge anyone that they're taking a science-based approach to climate change after refusing to look at it in this committee. Think about that. I will certainly be bringing that up. I'm amenable if somebody wants to amend the motion to have fewer meetings, but we need to actually look at the impact of this and give recommendations to the government on how to fix this. Having it sit for a year and then having these, like this CBC article come out, guys, this is our committee's mandate. We've got to do this. We've got to get this done. Mr. Cannings, I implore you really to think about this, as well as my colleague from Quebec. There's no reason why we can't chew gum and walk at the same time. We should be looking at this in this committee, specifically on the angle of our country's ability to bridge that delta between our emissions reductions target and reality right now, which is we're 50% off. So, giddy up.
Okay, before we go to the next speaker, to the witnesses, I think an important part of our study is the dialogue that we were hoping to have. We have your testimony, which is very valuable, but it isn't the dialogue that we're hoping for, because Indigenous traditional knowledge for us settlers is something that we need to be educated on, even how to pronounce the name of your organization. We are trying our best to learn along the path of reconciliation. So I've been talking to the clerk about the possibility of opening up an opportunity to have this dialogue at a future meeting. But with 15 minutes left in this meeting, we won't have a sufficient representation of the dialogue to respect your being here. So we'll let you go so that we'll continue on with what we're dealing with in the committee. I mean, we're the only committee that's studying Indigenous traditional knowledge, and it's unfortunate that we're missing the opportunity today, but hopefully we'll get back to it soon in a time that we can find agreeable to everybody. So I'll let you go. The clerk just has to quickly say a few things to you on our way out, and then we'll go to the next speaker on the list, which is Mr. Tucker. And thank you to the witnesses for being here and for preparing to be able to talk to us. Unfortunately, we weren't able to satisfy that.
Mr. Chair. Just to their witnesses, I thank you again for being here, but there is specifically the challenges of the Arctic with climate change that we're not studying, we're not researching. They are firsthand living the effects of our planet's changing climate. And this study that they were here to provide information on, I would suspect, not to say what the study will say, but I suspect in the end it'll be that the federal government should fund the research into Indigenous and northern traditional sciences and how we could incorporate them into how we fight climate change. And this is the funding aspect that will come in. How do we fund that? We have $1.5 billion of taxpayers' money that is just frozen now. It was collected. The purpose of that taxation was to help lower emissions in Canada, and now we find out that it was really to get the insiders rich. And it's disgusting to think of the hypocrites out there that cry out about the crisis that we face and then steal money from a fund that was supposed to address that crisis. And I would hope that we all think about this and the importance of getting to the bottom of these issues and how it relates to science and all the opportunity costs that if there's this massive amount of fraud in the Sponsorship 2.0 fund, think of all the science that's not going to be invested in. Think of the research that's not going to be done, and think of the discoveries that will not happen because of the theft of taxpayers' dollars out of this fund. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not entertaining this motion for 5 meetings to get to the bottom of what happened and who got rich. Thank you.
Okay, now we have Mr. Turnbull. If you have some comments, at some point I'd like to try to get to a vote on this.
I find it pretty rich for the party that has not supported any one of the policies or programs that our government's put forward to fight climate change is now using it as a way of blocking witnesses in a study that I think is really valuable for this committee. Not to mention that we've already made very clear that, and you know very well, that other committees are studying this. So your intention is now to have 4 committees studying the same topic that an Auditor General is doing an audit of. So what could possibly be the motivation for that? What could we possibly get out of doing it 4 times over? The other thing is that Conservatives have said that this is somehow the only fund that our government has, which is absolutely not true. It's not even close to the truth. It's absolutely so far from the truth that it almost surprises me and shocks me of how little they actually know about what our government is doing to help fight climate change. So just for example, in the last budget, 2023, there was a list of all of the things that are, all the investments, the key investments in programs that our government has made since 2015. $15 billion for the Canada Growth Fund, $8 billion for the Net Zero Accelerator, $4.2 billion for the Low Carbon Economy Fund, the Critical Mineral Strategy, the Zero Emission Vehicles Strategy, Clean Fuels Fund, the National Trade Corridors Fund. The list goes on the Canada Infrastructure Bank, et cetera. So there's a significant number of other investments that we've made. So the case that they're trying to make that says somehow this fund, which is an arm's length organization that has been running for quite some time, and I'm not saying that there isn't merit to looking into this organization. I'm just saying that it's happening already in the most appropriate committees to look into that. I don't think that this committee needs to do duplicate work. If you're really about efficiency and the use of resources, then why would you have 4 committees studying exactly the same topic at the same time? We certainly have limited time in this committee, and we have important work to get on to. Let's move on with it. And I'm really sorry that the witnesses had to suffer from a waste of their time here today.
Well,
now
thank
they've
you,
all
and
gone, so we've missed the opportunity.
I don't want this to get into a back and forth. I think we've been making some strong statements on both sides. I'm hoping that we won't lose another hour of witnesses that we have lined up. But if we can try not to get back into the back and forth, which is really counterproductive. If there are any clear new messages, let's put them on the table. And otherwise, I'd like to try to get us to a vote. We have Mr. Tucker.
Yes, and I'd like to thank my honorable colleague for bringing up all the other funds, and it kind of tweaked on me. But it's not just the $1.5 billion of taxpayers' money being wasted on this fund. It's all the other wasted funds and potentially of fraud. And I think I just roughly tried to add up quickly of all the billions that this member has bragged about that potentially is also in fraud. And I would say amend this motion then. And to this point, we should be investigating all funds that this government has started to address climate change research, because it's not just the 1.5 billion. And Ryan's right. It's in the tens of billions of dollars now that has been funneled into green initiatives, and the truth is coming out that people are getting rich. There's companies that don't even exist getting paid. There is numerous examples of wrongdoing that affect our ability as a country to conduct the science and the research that is needed to be done to address the challenges that face our country. And I would amend this motion then to include the words, and we're going to have to work with the analyst here, I think, a little bit on it, because I believe they have the English and the French version on this one, and include the SDTC, because it's the one in the news, and it's the one that is the most, there's the most evidence out there of wrongdoing, but really it should be all the funds, so that it would be the SDTC and all other funds allotted to the research of climate change in Canada.
Could you repeat that, please?
You just get a message. The analysts are typing away over there. Could you repeat what that amendment looks like? The clerk is okay. So at the and all other government-funded programs that support climate change research. And yeah.
Just to confirm, that is after relevant STT officials, or is it further up in the motion?
Further up.
Further up, is it?
Surrounding wrongdoing at the fund.
At the fund, okay.
And if we can hear that list again, it was kind of eye-watering. I quickly wrote down all the billions of dollars, and I would hope that my honorable colleague would get on the speaking list. And please, I'd like to hear of all the funds that he has listed that have received billions of dollars again, on which ones we should be investigating the fraud and the misuse of taxpayers' dollars at. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone want to speak to this amendment? Ms. Rempel-Garner.
Again, I mean, to speak to this in the context of the relative inelasticity of carbon fuels in Canada, ostensibly research and development funding in Canada should be driving towards the production and deployment of technologies that would provide affordable and readily available technologies to Canadians to change behavior on the consumption of carbon fuel. And if we're not seeing the results of that investment that we're making, as my colleague Mr. Turnbull said, billions and billions and billions of dollars, then perhaps it is appropriate for this committee to say, how can the government be making better use of that funding from the perspective of ensuring that that money is actually delivering results in substitute goods, be it basic research, be it whatever. The government should not just be shouldn't just be articulating spending when this government is not even 50% of the way of meeting our emissions reduction target, and they're talking about, serious spending tens of billions of dollars, and if not more. I mean, we've got how many billions of dollars?
Over 20.
20 for sure, just right now. Those are billions of dollars. Where's the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions? How come we're only 50% of the way to making Canada's greenhouse gas emissions targets? If spending is a metric, how come we're not all the way there? If Canadians are being asked to pay all of this money, how come we're not 100% of the way on our targets? That is a question. So, maybe this amendment is right. Maybe, this is an inconvenient truth that the government needs to look at. We're spending a lot of money and we're not even 50% of the way. We're not even 50% of the way to making our greenhouse gas emissions targets. We've got people that are paying all of these. You've got one part of the country that gets an exemption on heating fuels. Well, what about the people in my riding? You had the minister in Edmonton saying that people should convert to from natural gas to heat pumps. Again, seriously, colleagues, I come out of, formally, a hot minute ago, an academic administration where we were asking questions about how to research and develop technologies and deploy them. If all that the Liberal government can do after 8 years is list tens, 20s, hundreds, I don't know, billions of dollars being spent, and we don't have those technologies on the table, they're not being developed, they're not being deployed for Canadians. Canadians are having to pay all this money in carbon tax, and that behavior is not shifting, then maybe something's not working. And maybe we as a committee should say, at least in the case of where we know that there's, quote, a sponsorship level scandal on this stuff, that maybe we should ask if this is the best way to use this money. Maybe there's a more effective way to support research. Well, I would argue, I think in the case of SDTC, there probably is. I think that's pretty clear at least. But again, we can talk about solutions, but like the government should not be so dogmatically attached to something that's not working when the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This government's failed. They're not even 50% of the way to making greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets. The reality is the only time that greenhouse gas emissions have materially decreased in Canada has been under a Conservative government. Yet another inconvenient truth. So, we're talking about climate change and the fact that this government has failed to deliver. They are overseeing, they're going to block a motion, I guess, to study $1.5 billion of tax dollars that's supposed to fight climate change research. I don't know. Let's talk about science some more and climate change. Let's keep doing that in the House of Commons. I'm happy to stand there all day if these Liberals vote against it. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you to addressing the comments through the chair as I requested at the beginning so that we're not doing the back and forth. Mr. Tucker is next.
Yeah, I just wanted to put on the record on this one a little bit of why I'm so disappointed in this government and why I think many Canadians are coming to this conclusion is the communication I get in my office. One that sticks out is Gladys. She's a retired senior, and she's out of money. It's the cost of living is out of control in this country. And every member here, if they read their emails, and I hope you guys do, and I hope residents keep emailing me and every MP that's out there, because people have to know the suffering and the pain that has been caused in Canada. And Gladys was talking about her natural gas bill. And it's not a luxury to heat your home in Saskatchewan in the winter. It's a necessity. And Gladys was, just in total, she was commenting on how the fiscal crunch has hurt her. But I think of Gladys and what's going to happen, or what's the follow-up from Gladys finding out that one part of the country is not going to be paying carbon tax on their heat this winter, and she will be. She already is using the food bank. She can't afford to stay in the house that she has lived in for 30-plus years because of the increase in costs. And right now we have the signature environmental plan that is now getting carve-outs that not all Canadians are being treated fairly. So Gladys is going to hear about how billions of dollars that was taxed and collected by Ottawa is being wasted. Next is Gladys is going to hear that there's members that voted down a study to find out, get to the bottom of who got rich. And I am sorry for Gladys and the countless Canadians that are struggling. And do know that I listen to you. I'm reading your emails. I am acting as best as I can to get the answers you need. And I would hope the members of this committee vote accordingly so that we can get to the truth. Thank you, Chair.
I don't have anybody else on the amendment. Mr. Cannings has his hand up.
I mean,
I'll
I
just
hate to do
also-
this, and I hate to.
I know, it looks like this is going to go on.
I'm just going to be very brief.
Okay, thank
But
you.
when Mr. Tucker says we're voting against not finding out who got rich, there are 3 other committees doing that right now, and that's why, again, this is wasting our time. I think it's a serious problem. I agree with that. Let's find out how it happened. But there are other committees doing that, so let's move on.
We do have other witnesses for the next part of the study. Some have flown in from Calgary to be with us this afternoon. Others have come from their traditional territories to be with us. I hope we can get to them, but Mr. Lobb has his hand up.
Not to belabor the point either. I don't speak very often about this type of stuff, but the only thing I will say is, in my time that I've been here, and I think back to the period of time between 2015 and 2019, there were topics that were quite similar that were studied on multiple committees, and I think we can all remember those. So to think that it's limited or there's only a certain number of committees that can study a certain thing, I think as long as there is an overlap or a component to it that makes sense, you can study. And to be honest with you, it is to the majority of the members, obviously, on how they vote, but you can study things that are being looked at in other committees. I mean, that is an obvious statement, and it's not limited to 2, 3, 4, or 10, to be honest with you. So I just make that point. And I believe that in our committees going forward, as we're working towards getting to a balanced budget, and we look at some of the mess the United States is in, and Japan and other countries with their financial crisis, it could be that committees going forward, that is quite a good use of their time, is to look at the expenses and trying to find out ways where we can better utilize our funds. And if you think about in the U.S., their deficit this year is almost the exact same size as the Canadian economy. Our economy is a little bit bigger, but that's how critical it is in the U.S. And the last point that I'll make is, and this is actually in your region, Mr. Chair, there was an apartment building approved for funding through CMHC financing, which is good. And it's to build, about 300 units, which is good. But one of the criteria for the builder to acquire the lowest interest rate finance through CMHC is the entire apartment building had to be electrical, the entire thing. No fossil fuels used at all. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that's the fact, and that's how you obtain the lowest interest rate for the builder to build that. Now, where's the problem? The building will be completed. It is. Okay. Because the building is going to be completed in 2025, and that is the exact same year the electrical crunch in the grid in Ontario is coming to pass. Okay, so back to the motion, the amendment, yeah, I understand, the amendment to the motion. The point is that everything we do, every decision we make, if we're looking at the economy, the budget, climate change, we can't be making decisions in Ottawa that are going to impact people in Ontario and potentially cause brownouts in Eastern Ontario. And so all I'm trying to say is, A, committees can study what they deem to be most important. I think even Justin Trudeau said at one time, They're the masters of their own domains committees, and there's long established proof that you can study similar topics in multiple committees. So I apologize to the folks that were here earlier that didn't get their chance for a full dialogue. Maybe there's a chance at some time to make up that time. Maybe they're so mad they don't want to see us again. But those were my points, and I leave it at that.
I think we've gone through the speaking list for the amendments, so now we'll have the vote on the amendment.
Shall the amendment to Michelle Rempel Garner's motion as proposed by Mr. Tucker carry? Ms. Bradford? No. Ms. Diab?
No.
Ms. Jazek?
No.
Mr. Lametti?
No.
Mr. Turnbull?
No.
Mr. Lobb?
Yes.
Ms. Rempel Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Soroka?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca?
En faveur.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
That's 6 nays, 5 yeas.
Okay. So the amendment's defeated. Back to the main motion. Let's go to the vote on the motion then.
Shall the motion of Michelle Rempel Garner carry? Ms. Bradford?
No.
Ms. Diab?
No.
Ms. Jazek?
No.
Mr. Lametti?
No.
Mr. Turnbull?
No.
Mr. Lobb?
Yes.
Ms. Rempel Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Soroka?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca?
En faveur.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
That is 6 nays, 5 yeas.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. I'd like to suspend for a few minutes while we get set up for our next round of questioning. Try and make it as tight as possible. If we can be back up and running by 10 after 5, maybe we can get testimonies and some questions in. Pursuant to Standing Order 10831 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, September 18, 2023, the committee resumes its study of integration of Indigenous traditional knowledge and science in government policy development. It's now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Georgina Lloyd, who's Assistant Deputy Minister of Northern Affairs, Rebecca Chouinard, Director of Natural Resources and Development, Sarah Kelhock-Bourque, Director of Arctic Science Policy Integration, and we have from the Department of the Environment, Mark Diorio, Assistant Deputy Minister, Science and Technology Branch, Patrice Simon, Director General, Wildlife Landscape Science, and Merle Ballard, Chief Indigenous Science Advisor, and Paul McDonald, Director of Indigenous Science Division. So each department will be given 5 minutes for your statements, and then we'll go to our questioning rounds. We'll start with Georgina Lloyd, Assistant Deputy Minister, Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to be with you today and the opportunity to speak on a topic that is very meaningful. I respectfully acknowledge and would like to pay respect that I am joining you and we're able to have this dialogue on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada recognizes that Indigenous-led research and Indigenous knowledge are essential to inform broad-scale science and policymaking in Canada. In the department, we have demonstrated experience that integration of Indigenous traditional knowledge into policymaking makes for more impactful policy with meaningful and durable results. Integrating Indigenous knowledge is fundamental to how CERNAC operates and how effectively the department can deliver on its mandate. Essentially, it relates to the principles of governance and processes that are built upon partnership and collaboration. When we are able to build co-development and co-management approaches into our processes, we know from experience that the results are more durable and also more likely to contribute to self-determination objectives of Indigenous partners. Across the department, there are several examples where we have worked in partnership with Indigenous peoples through co-development and co-management processes to integrate traditional knowledge with scientific research. For example, the co-developed Arctic and Northern Policy Framework is clear that Arctic and Northern peoples want knowledge gaps filled, but they also want changes to the way knowledge is gathered, created, and shared. As such, the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework approach to Arctic and Northern research features stronger regional and Indigenous involvement in the research process, including in setting priorities, undertaking research itself, and enhanced community-based observation. The framework is also clear that Indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge will be equally considered in decision-making. In regards to co-management, the Northern Resource Co-Management structure intentionally integrates traditional and scientific knowledge by virtue of the regimes created by legislation. This legislation implements commitments from modern treaties that require the integration of traditional and scientific knowledge into policies, processes, and decisions or recommendations. It also establishes resource co-management boards whose membership includes representatives from regional Indigenous communities who have experience understanding, analyzing, and incorporating traditional knowledge. These are the bodies responsible for decision-making around environmental assessment and resource management across the North. Shared decision-making models and co-management arrangements provide a practical mechanism for integrating Indigenous traditional knowledge into government decision-making and management processes for natural resources. Further to the practices that we have employed in the North, CERNAC is negotiating chapters in some British Columbia treaties that would commit federal departments to respond to requests from Treaty First Nations to explore a co-management and shared decision-making arrangement. This provides one potential mechanism through which Indigenous knowledge can be integrated with federal decision-making processes on environmental and resource management. It is proposed that the chapter be included in a number of treaties being currently negotiated in British Columbia. Further, we operate a program, the Northern Contaminants Program, one of Canada's longest-running research programs, which has some 3 decades of experience in bringing together Western scientific methods and Indigenous knowledge, perspective, and approaches to better understand and address the issue of contaminants from distant sources that make their way into northern and Arctic environments and build up in fish, birds, wildlife that serve as important food sources for Inuit, First Nations, and Métis peoples. The Northern Contaminants Program itself generally refers to an approach as a partnership approach, where government at federal and territorial levels, Indigenous organizations and governments, academia, and local communities all have a say in the research, the monitoring, and the supporting outreach activities that are undertaken, how they are done and by whom, and how their results will be communicated. The program recognizes that Indigenous peoples, their representative organizations, and their knowledge and input and direction are necessary at all stages of the research process. CERNAC will continue to work in partnership with Indigenous peoples to develop new collaborative ways to integrate Indigenous traditional knowledge. I look forward to the results of this committee's study to helping to inform those discussions into the future.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to that as well. And thanks to the testimony that we're getting, that'll help us along that way. Now we're going to Mark Diorio, please, from the Department of the Environment.
Thank you, Chair. I will share my opening remarks with Dr. Merle Ballard, who's my colleague here today. I'll start off by saying that science in of itself is the method we use to understand our physical and natural environment, and through measurement, through observation, and through experimentation. And in the scientific community, it's become very clear that we need to take an interdisciplinary approach, and one that considers different knowledge systems like Western science and Indigenous science. Indigenous people have been valued partners of the government in conserving and protecting our environment, and this partnership also includes participation in international delegations to groups like the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and on the IPBES, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Their contribution to Canada's international work has been extremely valued and has been leading in that sense. Early last year, the department created an Indigenous Science Division, Indigenous-led by Dr. Ballard, and one that is meant to really advance and consider the Indigenous knowledge system at the same time as we progress looking at Western science. That is, our goal is to make sure that we consider all knowledge systems at the same time when we start our work. Indigenous science brings together traditional knowledge. It brings together a long-term observation of our physical and natural environment. It has a perspective of looking at cumulative impacts on ecosystems, looking at the multiple stressors affecting our environment, and is really a values-based approach looking at a holistic approach to the environment as well as an interdisciplinary approach. So I will stop here, just state that this is a journey for us, and we are committed to including Indigenous science and considering knowledge systems from the start and throughout our work that we do as a department. And I'll turn over to Dr. Ballard.
Thank you. In January 2022, Environment Climate Change Canada created a new Indigenous Science Division to best integrate Indigenous science or traditional knowledge in Western science, better known as 2HC Intergovernment Policy Development. The ISD was structured to be the most effective in combining synergies between Indigenous and Western science. And to do so, Indigenous science developed 3 pillars, which are bridging, braiding, and weaving. Bridging means to connect the 2 sciences together and to foster awareness and the understanding and recognition of Indigenous science as a distinct and equal science to Western science. Braiding brings together the different ways of knowing and being by integrating which policy Indigenous and Western science can best work. Weaving is to ensure that both the sciences and Indigenous and Western science are employed to complement each other for better informed decision-making. So to integrate both sciences, while we integrate Indigenous science into government policy development and developing the Indigenous science lens to Indigenous to ECCC sees a science policy and program activities. It's important to be guided by the importance of Indigenous science indicators, tool and perspectives, such as repatriation, reconciliation, renewal, respect, reciprocity, responsibility, and relationships. Indigenous science tools must be applied to inform approaches regarding, for example, environmental issues, as well as the work of ECCC's work on a national Caribou Knowledge Consortium, the oil sands, and the shellfish of Tsleil-Waututh, as well as regarding polar bear research with the Inuit Nungakat. This must be accomplished in a manner that aligns with the approaches as specified by Indigenous nations, governments, the Truth and Reconciliation, and the TRC specific communities and the international instruments such as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The effective use of bridging and braiding will allow Indigenous science to weave Indigenous science and Western science to reports and publications that will be used by decision makers, governments, and other parties. And additionally, bridging, braiding, and weaving Indigenous science priorities and Indigenous leaderships to the entire spectrum of science practice within the federal government is essential in supporting Canada's commitment towards renewed nation-to-nation relationship and reconciliation with Indigenous people.
That's great.
Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. And we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to make sure we could get as much of your thoughts in as we could, Dr. Ballard. So thank you for doing that. And if there's more, we can send in to the clerk as well to make sure we capture all of your thoughts. But we're going to move on to our questions rounds now, starting with the Conservatives for 6 minutes with Gerald Soroka.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that point. And thank you to the witnesses for coming forward. I'm not certain who to direct it to for starting off with, but given the recent details about the mismanagement of funds at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, it has raised concerns about the oversight the government-funded green initiatives. How does the Department of Environment guarantee that similar mismanagement does not occur in this program, and what oversees that from happening?
Point of order. Relevance. I'd like to know how this question is relevant, Chair, to the current study, which is on Indigenous knowledge.
If we can work it into Indigenous knowledge through the answers, but Mr. Soroka, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually was just before my point of order. I didn't have a chance to finish. That's exactly what I was saying as part of the Indigenous guidelines as well. How does this relate? Please. To the Department of Environment, I think Mr. Diario.
All right. Well, Mr. Chair, I am the ADM of Science and Technology. We do not run programs on clean technologies. We do, however, work very closely with many Indigenous groups throughout Canada on aspects of community-based monitoring, on wildlife research in the north. There are many, many examples. The work that we do through collaboration with our partners There would be other witnesses who would be in better position to answer questions with respect to the programs that they run and the framework that the department has with respect to corporate management.
So any of the funding or money that you get is directly from the government? There is no other opportunities to get dollars? You don't apply for any funds or anything?
So, again...
There's a translation problem that we're having. Mr. Blanchet-Jocas?
Oui, rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président, merci. Désolé d'interrompre le collègue, c'est que la traduction n'a pas fonctionné là, pour la question.
So interpretation didn't work.
Merci.
You just got in. Yeah, okay. I'm watching time. I'll make allowances for the interruption there with the technical difficulty, but I think we're okay to go.
Do you need me to repeat the question, or is it up to the witnesses to answer?
The witnesses are asking for the question to come at them again.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, I'll just repeat the question. So the fund, you only receive money directly from the government. You do not apply for any other government grants or other government funding. It is only sole source from the government for any programs there or operations that you run.
With respect to science and technology,
Yes.
we do work with government funds. We work with academia through a number of mechanisms. We work through some programs, such as the Northern Contaminant Program, with a number of Indigenous groups. We receive funding through the Oil Sands Monitoring Program in Alberta, in the joint management of the program with the Government of Alberta to monitor the entire region, both for air, water, and wildlife.
Okay, so I'll just go on to another question then. You know, as on reserves, the carbon tax, because of some of the remoteness of a lot of these reserves, they don't pay personal income tax because of the exemptions, but yet carbon tax is charged on a lot of products that are being brought into the organization or businesses that operate there. Given that, you know, these increase in taxes and the cost of living, how does your department justify the carbon tax in places that are quite remote like this in the Indigenous reserves?
Again, I would say that the carbon tax is not the area of responsibility of the Science and Technology branch, and we work with a number of communities, do a lot of field work. Everybody is impacted by cost of living, and we manage through our budgets and through priorities in accomplishing the work we need to do.
So then, do you find that the budgets are needing to be increased because of the carbon tax for any of the science and research? Is that an issue or not?
We do not see that, no. So where we are at is that we're focusing our research where it needs to be focused, and we are managing within the budgets that we are given, given all the externalities that impact budgets.
Okay. So then when you were talking a lot about how, you know, you work with the Indigenous knowledge, and I was having some issues determining what's the difference between using their Indigenous knowledge versus just consulting with the different bands. Could you please give me a little better examples of some of the differences versus consultation versus Indigenous knowledge?
Yeah, thank you. Indigenous knowledge is very different from consultation. Consultation is, like, for example, if I would talk to you regarding a specific issue, that would be consultation. But we go to the Indigenous knowledge holders for them to share what they know about the environment, what they know about climate change, what they know about changes within species within real time, because it's their knowledge that's really critical when we develop policies. We go to them and they tell us what's happening on the land, and this is the knowledge that we want when we start the work that we do, the critical work that we do.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Oh my.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. It's that answer gives us a good perspective on exactly what we're trying to study here. So thank you for that. Now to Ms. Diab.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Thank you very much to the government departmental officials that are with us today. It's the first day that we are doing the study on Indigenous traditional knowledge and science in government policy development, and we were hoping to get into it an hour earlier. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and it is the only committee that's looking into how Indigenous traditional knowledge would help us in what we're studying. But here, let me ask a questions in terms of how can we integrate Indigenous knowledge to fight climate change? And I would like to say, Mr. Chair, I'm going to share my time with Mr. Turnbull because there wasn't much that we could do here this afternoon. So
that's your question?
That's my question,
okay.
Yes. And feel free to, whichever the department feels that would like to answer that.
Go first. All right, we're fighting for the mic. Again, we talk about, and again, the framework that was developed in the department by Dr. Ballard is one of understanding that we're starting at different places when it comes to knowledge and when it comes to science. And it is one of first bridging in the first step, then braiding, and then weaving knowledge together, knowledge systems together. So we don't often speak of integration of knowledge per se, but we do talk about this approach, this systematic approach of going through things. With respect to climate change, there's been many perspectives. We are working, for example, with the Inuit Circumpolar Council on some of the international work taking place on the fact that the Arctic is warming 3 times as fast as the rest of the world. And they're sharing their perspective. It's very true on the wildlife side, and my colleague here, Patrice Simon, leads the wildlife research into polar bears, into paired caribou, and perhaps I'll ask him to say a bit more on this.
Thank you, Chair. I would say that using traditional knowledge and Western science enable us to provide more comprehensive science advice and information on topics. And we would use the perspective of the Western science along with knowledge gathered through with Indigenous communities to bring those 2 ways of knowing so that people that makes policy and decision consider that as they implement the decision they have to make.
Thank you. Mr. Turnbull?
Dr. Ballard, and to all the witnesses, thank you for being here. This is really important work. I had some firsthand experience in and around the oil sands area working with the First Nations there, the Mixu Cree, the Athabasca Cree First Nation, and the Métis Local 125. And they were doing environmental monitoring on the water with Indigenous community members on the land, and the elders passing along some of the traditions and knowledge that they have accumulated. I imagine, and from talking with them, I understand that it must be challenging to keep that traditional knowledge alive. I also had firsthand bared sort of witness to just how much it can really enhance our understanding, which I think is a bit limited with Western science, although Western science has been a sort of dominant paradigm. Ms. Ballard, or Dr. Ballard, maybe you could speak to it seems to me that Indigenous traditional knowledge can really enhance our understanding of what impacts on the environment. Could you maybe speak to some examples and talk about how that's being integrated across different programs within ECCC?
We have about 2 minutes, so if we could think of the main points, that would be great.
Okay, I'll make it fast. We just completed a workshop a couple of weeks ago regarding weather predictions, where we held a scoping workshop within the department, and we gathered Indigenous knowledge holders regarding their knowledge, what they can share with us regarding weather. So this was a very good workshop, and this is an example of where we can collaborate between the department and the knowledge holders in better informed decisions. So we gathered a lot of information regarding the weather patterns, weather predictions. For example, I'll give you when a certain species, like the animals, when they behave a certain way, they give an indication of what are the weather patterns, what it's like, what the weather is like going to be springtime. So from there, we can determine whether or not that there's going to be a drought, whether or not that there's going to be flooding. So using these as the indicators, we can start developing a better response mechanism in order to deal with the flooding as a result of climate change, because the animals, the knowledge of the indigenous peoples, with their knowledge of a species, with the land and air, and they work together, and we can share this information with the rest of Canada in better ways to develop better policies, to do predictions. And another one that's really important is the use of Indigenous language. It is so critical because of the work that I'm doing with the universities is using Anishinaabe, which is my language, my mother tongue, and to understand the names of places and the spaces. For example, Saskatchewan, you probably know what that means. Saskatchewan means in my language where the water runs dry, where the water evaporates. So that's what the word means. And when you start to develop the indicators from why the province was named that big area before the borders, why it was named as such, then you will start to understand the indicators over time from then to the present, what happened. You can start in developing the indicators, and this is the Indigenous knowledge and the Indigenous science that we seek when the names of places and spaces across Canada, and the Indigenous names of Canada, that's an Indigenous name. Where we're situated, that's an Indigenous name.
Thank you.
So to understand these names and the work that we do, they're all critical. I know that's kind of a side and going off, but
thank you.
They need to work together.
Yeah, thank you. Boy, the committee structure is very difficult for a subject like this. Mr. Blanchet-Joka for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je salue les témoins qui sont...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to acknowledge the witnesses who are here for this very important study. My first one is for our Chief Indigenous Advisor, Ms. Ballard. Thank you for being with us today. I'll go straight to the subject matter. I know the question of Indigenous knowledge can maybe bring up some suspicion in some, because it's not always scientifically validated. However, I'm open to that, and I'm happy that we can address this as part of this study, and I'd like to dispel a few things. I'll give you a moment to put on your earpiece so you can understand me well. I'd like to hear you speak about information that was disclosed by the government of Quebec. It was the Environment and Sustainability Assistant Minister who sent to the federal government information about C-69 that seeks to replace the National Office of Energy through the Canadian Energy Board. Mr. Beauchamp mentioned, and I'll quote, taking into account systematically the Indigenous knowledge on par with facts. Well, it's important to take this into account. How can we do this? If the data and information of Indigenous knowledge are contrary to the other science that we have, what can one do to manage that? And then how can a decision be arrived at? If I may, I'll start a response. I think that one of the witnesses in the last session had mentioned that there are different opinions in the scientific community. That's very commonplace. That's part of a scientist's job, is to establish the soundness of facts. Now, I think this is part of the process. Once again, this is something that we have started at the department. We've started working with Indigenous knowledge, but this is, in a general sense, part of the scientific method to be able to have different points of view based on our science to then come to a consensus or support different models.
One of the ways to resolve conflict is to create an understanding of both Indigenous and Western science. For example, to understand where Indigenous science is, the knowledge behind it, and the Western science, because Western science is one domineering science, and the previous speakers talked to the colonization. So what happened to the Indigenous knowledge, the Indigenous science that we had was also colonized. So bringing that awareness, why that happened, to the forefront is really critical in alleviating the conflict. For example, what we have to do is we need to understand the reasons why that happened, and bringing it to the forefront to understand that both sciences are really important, the Indigenous and Western science, because they're both sciences. It's just that Western science is more used to the lab, like the experiments, etc. But Indigenous science is like that too, where we go to the land for the experiments that we do. We, for example, when we develop the traditional medicines, we have the traditionalists, the medicine makers who take the medicines from the land. They know that they have to take the plants, whatever it is they're using, from as far away from human contamination. They have recipes as well that they use. That's the same as lab, but there's recipes that they have to be tested, like the color, the consistency. That's the same as Western. So these, once you start to understand these, and then the conflict that can be resolved, and then the knowledge of a species as well. Indigenous people are the ones that know what's happening on the land, and the relationship, building that relationship is really critical between Western and Indigenous science.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup des précisions. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer?
Thank you for that. Can you explain to us clearly, when you have data from your knowledge that are in contradiction, what are the mechanisms in place to make a decision? How do you come to a decision and then influence public policies when you're faced with these types of situations?
Premièrement, je pense que
Well, first of all, we have to develop our methods, so we co-develop policies. This way we can deal with problems that we might be faced with later. Then you have to understand the role of the branch. The role is to provide scientific advice. So it can be a publication in a newspaper or in different media outlets. We try to turn our work into a scientific advice document, and then that is used to inform policies. It's forwarded to the government. So this is how we try to approach these types of situations.
And Mr. Cannings, please, for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today. And it's this is something that I used to work with many years ago, 20, 25 years ago. I was an ecologist and trying to develop regional ecosystem recovery plans. And also I worked on the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada for 10 years. At the beginning of when Indigenous knowledge was being considered, and it was an awkward time because we didn't know how to work together. And so it was one of the reasons I wanted to bring this study together, is to find out what have we learned in those 20 years about bridging these. And I guess I would like to start with Dr. Ballard about, you mentioned this idea of bridging, braiding, weaving. For instance, when I was doing ecosystem recovery plans, we would have big, digital maps, and the Western scientists would put layer upon layer upon layer of things that they knew. But it was difficult to, layer on Indigenous knowledge. It just didn't seem to work in the same way. And I'm just wondering, as an example, how that bridging, braiding, weaving process would work in a broad study like that.
I'll give you an example of the work that we did regarding clam gardens on the West Coast. This is a really good example of the bridging, braiding, and weaving. The bridging is when we asked the people of the Wewik Nation what was their knowledge of the ancient, their knowledge of the clam gardens, the ancient clam gardens that have been in existence for thousands of years. That's a bridging part. They share with us the knowledge of the ancient technology, which is a science, that's an engineering technology that was invented by the indigenous people, like clam gardens. And then the braiding is when they start to share the knowledge with us about the clam gardens. When we went to them, they gave us a lot of information, more than what we asked for. For example, they gave us information regarding the food that they ate back then, like the food systems they had in place. They shared with us the technology they used to build the clam gardens. They shared with us the importance of the clam gardens within their little ecosystems, what the other species lived within the clam gardens beside the clams. That's the bridging. And then from there, we start to stream these, this is what, braiding, braiding, we start to braid, for example, food, the technology that they use, the ecosystems. Then from there, we're developing a video as well, and that's going to be shown within our department and across the department, and it's going to be shared with the community as well. That's weaving these knowledge systems, the knowledge of the clam gardens and the Western science, and we'll be developing reports as well as publications. So that's an example of a knowledge that's being bridged, braided, and weaved.
Thank you. And perhaps, I don't know, Ms. Burke, do you have examples like that you deal with as, see your science policy integration? I'm just wondering if there are examples like that in the North that you can speak to.
Yes, thank you. There are lots of examples from the North of knowledge systems coming together, and not necessarily one system being integrated into another, but as my colleague says, braided or woven, or they complement each other and lead to an overall more robust understanding of a situation, of an issue. I'm most familiar with work on contaminants through Northern Contaminants Program, and bringing Indigenous knowledge holders together with scientists leads to better science, better questions that are asked, more informative for policy, and a much more thorough understanding. If we sent only scientists to look at contaminant levels in a particular food source, well, would they know what and wanting to know how it affects health? They'd need to know what parts of the animal are consumed, at what frequency, in what seasons, because all of this affects the contaminant levels. Indigenous knowledge might not give you micrograms per gram of contaminant levels, but it will tell you really important information that's going to inform health risk advisories, for example. So it's by working together from the earliest stages, shaping the research questions together, coming from finding the areas of common interest, common concern that lead to then thorough understanding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for getting that in. Looking at the clock, it would be hard to do another round of questions, unfortunately, with the interruptions that we've had. So I'm going to thank the witnesses for being here. And Maxime, you've got your hand up.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je demanderai à mes collègues.
Yes, I'd like to ask my colleagues if I could have 37 seconds. I'd like to announce a good surprise to finish this session, to finish this committee meeting. I'd like to table my motion, notice of motion for the next study of the committee. If nobody objects.
At the will of the committee, so sure.
Aucune objection? 37 secondes.
We have our clocks.
37 seconds. Okay, off I go. Pursuant to 103.8, the Standing Committee on Science and Research do a study on funding of the federal government between the universities of Canada and on the concentration of them within the U15 membership, small and medium size, that the committee grant at least 12 hours to this and that their conclusions be reported to the House.
Okay, so that's a notice of motion. We'll pick that up next time we're doing some committee business and see what we can do with that. Thank you so much to the witnesses. I wish we had more time. But it's the structure that we're working under. If you have more information, please do send it to us, and my apologies for the shortness of this meeting. With that, meeting adjourned.